part of what makes a character memorable is our ability to be able to describe them, right? And if we can describe a character, that's usually because we know the character. And so we want to think about like what makes us able to know a character? How do we get to know a character? And that all kinds of kind comes from how that character is rendered on the page, right? And so we just gonna put it out there. So anybody in here who is teetering about whether or not you're a writer, um, and I always like to share that being a writer has very little to do with whether you've published or won prizes or anything like that. The only people who show up to Saturday morning webinars on writing is writer. Okay, you're a writer if you're in here doing this instead of sleeping in. Okay, so we got that out the way. So the other thing about being a writer is that us being in this space together, so we're all writers. So that means we can talk about weird, strange writer stuff and no one's going to judge us or like call the people. Okay. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is like how we create these people on the page. And we create people on the page. And if we do it well enough and we create characters that are strong and independent, and complex and compelling on the page, and they feel like real people, they start acting like real people. And so you know you've hit a sweet spot with your characters when they're actually kind of telling you what they're going to do next, right? Um, you can't talk about that in mixed company, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. I found this amazing statistic for us about characters that I'll share in a bit. But the stronger you make your characters on the page, the stronger they show up for you, the writer, which means the stronger they show up for the reader. And that's what we're all about. Where we want our main goal is how do we get the reader to go on this journey with us slash our characters? How do we get the reader to keep turning the page, right? We want our readers to keep turning the page, that next chapter. Think about your one of the best books you've read where you kept telling yourself, like, just one more chapter, then I'm gonna go to bed, I promise. Just one more chapter, just one more chapter, right? Um, that's the kind of books we want to write. The ones people can't put down, where people have just got to know how this turns out for the protagonist, right? So with that, I'm going to do a little screen sharing, and we're going to talk about just kind of an introduction to character. And these are basics. So it might be a refresher for those of you who are actively taking workshops and classes. For other folks where this might be your first time in a workshop or class, or doing any kind of formal introduction to writing elements, it might be new. Either way, we're going to take a look at it together. All right. So just some character basics. Our main character, our lead character, is called the protagonist. All right. That is who moves the story forward. You can have more than one protagonist, of course, if you have a novel or a short story collection where you have multiple point of views or you have multiple protagonists who somehow kind of um, have a interweaving story. I know for a lot of romance novels, sometimes one of the structures is to have like a chapter per protagonist. And so you kind of get to see both sides of that story with it going back and forth. And so the protagonist is just the lead character, the main character, the one that moves the story forward. A really easy way to remember the word protagonist is to look at the front, the root of it, which is pro, right? Progress. It is the character who progresses the story. That's the protagonist, okay? The next is the antagonist, the antagonist. So the antagonist is the opposing character or the opposing force. And so this is primarily in terms of our classic types of conflict for drama, which we have person versus person. So that would be your antagonist is another character. You can have person versus self, where the protagonist is also the antagonist. And so they're doing a lot of internal conflict, trying to figure things out. There's person versus circumstance, where our antagonist is going to be a situation, okay, or happenstance. And then person versus society, where our antagonist is going to be social norms and traditions, kind of this greater idea of society and expectation. Now, the thing to remember with our classic types of conflict is they are not mutually exclusive. You don't have to just say, well, this is my one conflict in my story. Most stories have several conflicts going on at once, and that's part of what makes the story layered, right? There is usually a primary conflict that is kind of pushing the plot forward, but then within that, you'll see a lot of overlap, right? Between what our protagonist is up against internally and also externally, right? And so that's just an introduction to our characters. Now, our characters also can be described one of two ways. Our protagonist almost always, always, always is a round character and should be a round character. And so a round character just means the character is complex. It's layered and complicated, and the character usually changes and evolves throughout the story. See also humans. We are all complex characters. We are round characters, okay? We want to consider what it means to have a complex character. And the reason I like to talk about characters' complexity and complications, whether that's emotional, mental, physical, all these things that can help give us insight to a character's life and how they show up in the world, is to help us kind of move away from the classic or traditional hero versus villain dichotomy, right? When we have a round or complex character, we want to think about how those lines kind of blur. When you think of hero versus villain, I feel like it can be oversimplified to say like this person is good and this person is bad. And a lot of our most complex characters, our character is usually conflicted. Our character has a little bit of both sometimes. Think about a character that is a good person, but might be in a tough situation, right? And have to make some not so savory decisions, right? Think about what happens when good people are desperate, or when they're angry or lost or misinformed, right? And so all of those are about round characters. Yes, Darth Vader is a round, complex character who, you know, I always think about two of my two favorite series is Breaking Bad and The Wire. And I love both of those series because on the one hand, in Breaking Bad, right, we got Walter White, who is he's a teacher, he's a husband, he's a father, but he's also a drug dealer, right? And ends up, caught up in murder and crime and all these things. And along with The Wire, right? With The Wire, we have characters who are sort of depicted as, drug dealers and murderers, but they, just like Walter White, are trying to provide for their families, right? They're trying to lift their families out of poverty. And when you don't have a lot of options, you are desperate and you do what you can, right? Are those characters able to be considered good people because they've made some bad decisions or done some bad things, right? Now, this isn't to say that there aren't some villains, right? There are villains, people who are just like misanthropes and just evil and operating from a place of hatred and destruction and ill intent. Like, that's a real thing. But we also want to, when we're crafting our characters, we want to move away from sort of that, this is this and this is that, and see how we can kind of blur those lines a little bit, because that's when you start kind of tugging at the heartstrings and getting your readers to question themselves, to question the world that you've created on the page, and then as a result, maybe start looking at the world around them a little differently. And I feel like that's one of the beautiful things about literature, is it can give us an opportunity to think more broadly about how we view folks.